the police pension probe, with all of the goings on here and there about it. Yes, you might have heard enough, but can you ever hear enough about that matter, by the way, when no solution has been sought or found yet? Well, this morning we're joined by Mr. George Etomi, who is the pioneer chair of MBA section on business law. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, perhaps we should just get this this comment from the former head of service. He gave a perspective that, I mean, had the chairman of that task force, Abdul Rashid Maina, left office when he should have, perhaps some of this would not have happened. And he was speaking about institutions. But just hold on, let's look into this. Okay. And then you respond to it.
Come anywhere. If the chairman of the STARS team did not exceed his mandate, actually responded to the complaints from SGF, and indeed did not refuse to hand over. So I did not control or manage head of service, police pension at all.
Peace, me, but that just, I mean, some describe it as the tip of the iceberg, but from a whole picture of entire things. But here we see, again, institutions just falling flat on its face. Were you surprised by any of this? And perhaps, how do you think we might even begin to seek a solution for this?
I think to start with, I'm not surprised. Well, we have weak institutions. This is just another in a long saga of disappointments we have in the way governance goes on in this country. Now, the idea of the pension scheme was very good. It's designed to allow you at least live out your old age in some degree of certainty. But what we have found with this particular police fund is that it falls within one of the exemptions in the overall pension scheme. And that was because some of these schemes were already in existence before the Pensions Reform Act, and they were allowed under transitional provisions to continue to exist until, as it were, the last pensioner dies. So in terms of the design, it was good, but the major fault here is that the administrator is not only allowed to administer, he's also allowed to collect money. And it's a major difference between this particular scheme and the new pension scheme that we have. Under the existing pension scheme, not PENCOM, not the PFAs, they don't handle money. The money actually resides in the CBN. They are merely administrators. But in this particular case, the lacuna that I see is that they can handle money. And once money comes in, against the background of poor records, inefficiency, at times you don't send the right people to go and administer it. You need thoroughgoing professionals to do that. We don't even know the payroll of the federal government. This scheme is just one of several others. I'm sure you guys saw that even with the PHCN, there is this issue of ghost workers. It's just one of the continuous things of ghost workers.
Perhaps, just allow me come in here, sorry, maybe you can actually expatiate more for us. When you talk about not handling money per se, we'll look at what is happening with the PFAs, yes, and maybe some kind of money is being deducted at source. Yeah. So is it that the money is deducted for, let's say, the police being taken to an administrator that handles this money different from the PFAs?
Yes, that's the problem, because these are transitional provisions. These were pension schemes that were already in existence. The police, the military, customs, immigration, they were already in existence. And they tried to quarantine them by creating special departments under the Pensions Reform Act. And that naturally, the act could not be made retroactive. And the whole idea was you put them in this space, this quarantine sort of, until the last pensioner dies. That's really the reason behind it. But where I think the weakness exists, unlike what you find with existing PENCOM, is that they are allowed to handle money. What they do is a requisition to the head of service or to the budget office for some monies to be sent to them on a monthly basis for the payment, just like salaries. Really, they're salaries. In fact, when you use the word fund, it's a misnomer. They're actually salaries, they're entitlements. They're not supposed to bank the money, keep it somewhere, invest it. You're supposed to pay it like a salary the way you pay all other salaries. And that's the lacuna. And any smart person will meander within that lacuna. Secondly, you need to look at how the structured reporting lines are.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, the administrator of the police pension fund is nominated by the head of service. He gets in there. But then he works with about 200 other police officers who constitute the pension departments. Now, you look at how uncertain, how unclear the reporting lines are. And then also by the Pensions Act, they're supposed to make returns monthly also to PENCOM. So when you look at it, it has 3 bosses. He works with the head of service. The police as an institution reports to the Minister of Police Affairs. And then you have PENCOM. So what you just need is a smart guy who gives you on a need-to-know basis.
But when you say you report to maybe, for instance, 3 now, for instance, now,
yes.
shouldn't that have been some kind of a safety measure to safeguard that fund or salary for the pensioner just when he would need it?
The problem is the discipline. Who do you discipline? Who disciplines who? And that's the saga that's been going on. Every head of service comes. In fact, part of the problem is also we've never really had a head of service who stayed long enough to understand how it works. They stay barely 11 months, it goes, and the administrator just sits. They just sort of sit them out. So what you just have is an unclear and an uncertain reporting lines, and in some cases a clear breach of the law.
Well, was it wise in the very first instance to have, make the police pension fund an exception to the rule?
Yes, because you really had no choice. Like I said, you don't make laws to have retroactive effect. But what was wrong was to give them money. What should have happened should have been for, once the payroll is ascertained, the money, the funds are domiciled, like this we see with what exists in the current pension fund, with the central bank. And a verification is made, and then the pensioner is paid directly.
Well, would you kind of, put us through what happens in the civil service and what exactly is happening with the police so that people can understand? Because, as you rightly pointed out, it's very murky. A host of people cannot figure out what exactly went wrong. All they know is that money meant for pensioners was misappropriated by those who were supposed to be in charge of it.
Sure.
That's all they know. Yeah,
but look at what, again, let me take you back to what the design was. The design was to have a security for workers, generally speaking, both public and private sectors. And then you needed a good regulator. So the Pensions Reform Act was passed to administer both public and private pension schemes. So it's not just both. So 2007 going forward is not a problem. What we're dealing with here, it's the going back. And to cater for the already existing pension schemes, like the police, the customs, the military, they created departments. The law created pension departments. And those departments were supposed to administer under the supervision of PENCOM. But where the problem is arising is that unlike what exists today, they are also allowed to collect money. And once they collect money, in the sort of murky atmosphere that we have, where the police, in the case of the police, where there's a problem, the head of the administration is appointed by the head of service. The police as an institution reports to the police minister, and PENCOM is also there to be reported to on a monthly basis. All you just need is a smart, irresponsible fellow to go meander between the 3 of them.
Since all 3 of them don't compare notes.
Yeah, and they don't compare notes. Notwithstanding the composition of the administrative team, is supposed to have nominees from the Federal Minister of Finance, the head of service, and different other people.
So
it's a failure, it's a weakness, it's a failure of institutions.
What should have been obtainable? Because I mean,
what should have happened,
yes.
what they should have done was what is happening today. As I told you, 2007 going forward is not really a problem, and that's because they don't handle money. When you hear 4 trillion naira pension fund, 5 million people in the scheme, and no cover, you won't find a cover with PENCOM, you won't find it not even with the PFAs, and there are clear guidelines about what you do with those funds. In fact, those funds are ring-fenced. They exist in banks. They are not checking accounts. So it's not a question of the administrator being able to access those funds and do what they do like. Even if those banks collapse, the funds are secure. They are ring-fenced. Because they are salary. You can't touch them.
Because people have to know, because now some people are already scared and say, if you say people won't die in the future because of this, the PFA, the existence of the PFAs and the administrators that would actually look after these funds, and you say, well, nothing will touch the funds irrespective of what happens to the banks, just in case. Yeah. How certain are we, and why do you say so?
I say so because, as I told you, they're not checking accounts, so it's not as if somebody can give instructions, move these funds here, take them. The funds are actually domiciled with the CBN, but naturally, physically, it's this within these banks that they exist. So they are not available for you to use the way you want to. And if you want to invest them, there are clear guidelines about investing them. But that's not what's obtaining with the police fund, as I told you. With the case of the police fund, the administrator has wide powers. He receives the funds, he puts them, and that's why they're able to move the funds back and forth, and we'll come back to that, because the banks that opened accounts without doing the proper checking are culpable as well, if you ask me.
Okay, but could it be that it couldn't have been a lost cause? There could have been a way some of these things could be amended such that they prevent monies going into wrong hands as this has happened, even though the Pension Reform Act perhaps can be retroactive in this case.
Yeah, it comes to this overall question of compliance and what you do, generally speaking. Now, the compliance in the public sector is just generally very weak. With the private sector, there isn't as much of a problem. With the public sector, it's a big problem. And what you do is you need compliance officers that have parallel reporting lines.
The typology of an auditor or something?
In fact, stronger than an auditor.
Okay.
In the mode, but stronger than an auditor. And what they do is they create several red flags. If upon the happening of X events, something automatically happens. Y events, something else happens. It is those red flags that tell you well in advance that something wrong is about to happen. You don't have those checks and balances in the public sector. It's not restricted only to the police. For example, practically, what happens with these funds is that the police have never made their monthly returns. Ironically, the military have been making monthly returns. The police have not. And PENCOM is totally helpless. There's really no sanction. There's nothing PENCOM can do to them. And if you talk to PENCOM, they will tell you. I think it was on TV. They wrote to them. They asked them questions. And these guys are awash with funds. And you know what they can do with funds.
Honestly, I was reflecting on what Chamberlain did say now, that they can't compare notes. But again, if you look at those in charge of this particular fund, one shouldn't have be talking about it, what is happening now. For instance, when Mr. Stephen Oronsai did set up that almost 2 years ago, that was 2010, the comprised representatives from the EFCC, the State Security Service, Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Commission, and also Office of the Auditor General and Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. How could all of those heavyweights, agencies or representatives from these bodies look the other way for us to now start talking about the sordid handling of these funds?
It's very sad, but I would say something very quickly. With due respect to Mr. Oronsai, I really don't think the EFCC, the ICPC should have been dragged into this. I don't like you drag people who are meant to be the watchdogs about this entire corruption process into this sort of administrative role of managing things. Some of them will get compromised.
This was supposed to be the task force. I mean, at this point, point, they already saw that something was not quite right. Something wasn't the way it ought to be.
Sure enough.
And as such, they wanted to draw the attention of this anti-graft agencies into them.
Sure enough. But in my opinion, not this early. Because who's going to investigate now that there's a problem? And they were part of it. And you can see the sort of name dropping that's going on. It creates a cloud again. That's Minor telling you, oh, we went to verify 20 pensioners, and it gives you a list of 90 people who went, amongst them the head of EFCC, although they are coming out to deny it. It creates a cloud. They should have been insulated from this process. They should be waiting to get the result. What you need the KPMG went there, for example. Why don't you get the good first-class rated auditors to go check this thing and come with their results?
But this may sound a little off the cuff, but one wonders, I mean, if those agencies that are supposed to just make sure the investigation goes on properly, like that of the EFCC and the police, if they have been approached saying, okay guys, could you come join this? What would have been wrong if they say, oh, wait a minute, from the look of things, we may be dragged in the mud, I'll pass on this one? I
agree. They should have done that. They should have done that. They should have done, because it's ultimately, it's like getting all of us involved in some football match. And I call all of you to be referees when I know one of you eventually appeal lies to you in case something goes wrong. But we've already on the field messed around, and then what moral right would you have to supervise? And that's the difficulty we're having. Already before you start, the head of the EFCC is having to sort of exculpate himself. No, I wasn't there. I mean, it's awkward.
Yeah, it is awkward. But you know, at that point in time, we were speaking with benefit of hindsight now.
Yeah, sure.
At that particular point in time, you would have seemed that, you know, it was okay for them to be there in the sense that we already smelt a rat. We already knew that something wasn't going as it should. And we're bringing in these people because we want to be able to say, if there's something wrong here, then you people can step in and hold those people responsible. And in many ways, if you look at the reports that we have gotten so far from the head of service and even from the Minister for Finance, it seems a host of things went right until, according to the head of service, you know, the head of the task force overstayed his welcome.
How come he managed to overstay his welcome? If you had said in a professional organization, you give them clear mandates, they will do it and give you the report.
Task force wasn't what we should have put in place.
This task force business all over the place. This task force essentially go and replicate the work of already existing departments, committees, whatever, already existing committees and departments. So we've got to be careful about the use to which we put task forces. If you're unsure about something, send in the professionals. Let them give you the report, and then you act on it.
What you find is that most times when you send in an audit firm, and an audit firm goes there, does what they should do, and they come up with their recommendations and reports. What oftentimes happens is that the people in the ministries or the head of that particular ministry might not be comfortable with handing the implementation of these recommendations to those already in the ministry because it might be scuttled. So what you find is that they try to bring in another extra body to try and help straighten out the process so that, you know, people can fall in line and then they leave.
Extra body from the same ministries?
Maybe not.
Who are reluctant to... You see, bottom line to everything we're discussing are issues of integrity. If there's a problem and you identify the problem, then there must be somebody you are reporting to that's willing to deal with it. But if you're dealing with a situation in which, as you see, everybody is passing the buck, the head of service says, oh, I didn't know this was happening, this one overstayed his welcome, and they appear helpless about somebody who overstays his welcome. Where are the disciplinary processes? Somebody opens a bank account in his brother's name and somehow nobody picked it up. There's a problem. And that's why I said you need compliance. compliance is going to be big in this country going forward. It's going to be the most effective tool for fighting corruption.
But why do we get the impression that it looks as though they handle government business as nobody's business?
Yeah.
And so anything goes. No standards, nothing. You just go in there, do what you can what you get, and sit on the can, and eventually you move on.
Well, that's the tragedy of our system today. As I've mentioned in private discussions with close friends, I just wonder how at very private family personal levels, our levels of integrity are very high. If your child came back from school with a ruler that does not belong to him, you're all very upset, you want to get to the bottom of the matter, you actually take the child back to school to find out what's gone wrong. The same child ascends to, as he keeps ascending the scale, these fibers get weaker and weaker, and by the time he gets to the center, he's actually blamed if he does not get the loot and come back home. There is some disconnect between what we all privately subscribe to as high ethical standards and what then obtains when the same individuals get to the top. You actually look stupid if you get there and don't do something. So we really need to start identifying what makes this thing happen. And that's why I said the anti-corruption battle should include, apart from the obvious issues of enforcing a lot of our laws that don't exist, we must begin to get to the point where compliance takes center stage.
Well, you talk about compliance, and it takes us back to the plight of the seniors in our society. And everyone is really concerned. That is why the PFAs and as well as this committee was set up and put in place. Still, we're getting to hear stories of not proper management or handling of this particular fund. How can we secure a better future for the seniors of this country?
First of all, I don't know how come they're made to come out every year for some kind of verification in an era where IT helps you solve issues of identity. You should be able to come one round, do your biometrics, and they match it against the existing records, and then they identify it. PENCOM has done it. But it's this saga we're looking about that is not being done. So every year they bring helpless senior citizens, and this, I think, it's wicked, just to put it very mildly. So we actually need the payroll of the federal government to be managed differently. Once that payroll is managed differently, these things will not happen.
You seem to subscribe to the opinion that, the civil service is capable of reforming itself if there are, say, recommendations put in place to help guide it in that particular respect. Do you think that it can actually help cleanse itself, or do you think
I won't go that far. The problem is that the civil service, because of the way it's structured, even when you get to learn the truth, you are afraid to go up there and say it, just in case your boss has a different mindset. So it's not as if a lot of the things we're talking about is being discovered for the first time. I can assure you that a lot of these reports would have been going back and forth. In fact, when I see some ex-PAMSECs who are caught in this saga, you kind of ask yourself, when you were there, what did you do? Most of them know that there's a lot going wrong. It's not just the police. A lot is going wrong. There are more ghost workers, perhaps, than would. Yeah. And then you look at, they say this is a transitional provision until the last pensioner dies. But you still have records of people who are collecting pension as far back as those who retired in 68 till today. Oh, 100?
But then, I know the security agencies have got their limits, they've got their jurisdiction. But shouldn't this concern them? Because if you look at these huge funds, they've been moving up and down, nobody seemed to trace anything until it all came to the fore. Now, at least if they did, no one made any noise about it. Shouldn't they be concerned as part of the challenge we have nationally with security?
Well, I think the question of corruption is beginning to have a security dimension. One of the reasons, for example, where a lot of the international anti-corruption laws we have, like the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the UK Anti-Bribery Act, and even ours, and those have a large measure of anti-money laundering provisions. One of the major reasons they are taken seriously abroad is the fact that they are also sources for funding terrorist activities. Often, the proceeds of a crime you seek to launder. And that's why everywhere else it's being taken very seriously. And our security agents should begin to look at corruption from this perspective. Now, we're having too many problems in Nigeria, security challenges in Nigeria. The key element is, how are these insurgencies being funded? From what source? Nobody knows. Ordinarily, an up and doing security apparatus should be tracking lifestyles. And when somebody begins to exhibit profligate lifestyles, and you check it against their means, whether in the public or private sector, again, it should raise a red flag. And then you keep on that sort of track. This is what they do anywhere else. And when you do that consistently, you will attack the base, the funding for most of these terrorist activities. So the answer is yes.
But
they should be exceedingly concerned about what's going on.
For instance, they could play a role here, because in UK, I mean, they've got this, I forgot what they call it, but the policy was that you can't go from rags to riches.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you're found to have done that,
absolutely,
it means you've laundered funds, or you're living above your means, and you could be liable to jail.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the NBA taking such
The
initiative?
NBA, incidentally, when I chaired the section on business law, one of the major things we did was to draw the NBA very close to some of the anti-corruption bodies like the EFCC, the Special Control Unit Against Money Laundering, because when these bodies were initially set up, they were at opposing ends with the stance of the NBA. And very naturally, one weakness in this fight are lawyers themselves. I'm the first to admit that. Because one way corrupt people can launder money through their lawyers. Exorbitant fees, you can stand in their place.
Legal fees, huh?
Well, I didn't say that.
No, I'm just wondering.
And then you have what they call a client solicitor privilege. So you're not allowed to talk about it. The law protects you. Rules of professional practice allow you to do that. But we're beginning to see worldwide that this lawyer solicitor privilege is being subordinated to the wider benefit of protection of society. And when all these anti-money laundering things we're talking about lawyers begin unwittingly to be used for terrorist financing or covering up the proceeds of crime, then you are reminded that you are also a citizen and that you owe a duty to protect that society. So to that extent, lawyers are being disciplined in the UK that you mentioned, and they are now actively participating. I'm happy to announce to you that we're beginning to bridge that divide.
Oh, really?
Part of the problem we had really was the method some of these security agencies used to employ. They're looking for you, they go get your father, or they get your mother, your husband, or somebody. We thought you don't break the law to enforce the law. So we had all those sort of differences. But through dialogue over the years, we have what they call the designated non-financial institutions, to which a lot of these professional organizations, including the law, belong. And we interface with the Special Control Unit Against Money Laundering, where a lot of these issues come up. And then we discuss the roles we're each supposed to play, which is meant to be complementary.
You know, so yes, I like the way you tied it around what is happening in the country now. We'll talk about security matters, and we'll also talk about funds, how some of these people are being funded. But again, remember this same law that has always been in existence, still very much there, that you don't get to withdraw as an individual, maybe over $1 million, without you alerting the authorities. And if Mr. Maina, for instance, did say, well, he noticed that on a daily basis, in his words, that 200 million, 300 million were being withdrawn from the accounts. Who was really in charge of, blowing the whistle to alert those that should know when such monies are being withdrawn from such banks?
Well, there is something they call the currency transaction reports and the suspicious transaction reports. Those are some of the requirements under the anti-money laundering regime. So clearly, the banks have a reporting duty. Mr. Mena himself also has a reporting duty, and I use him figuratively. Anybody who's in charge of something has that reporting duty. So it would be interesting to know whether these reports were given, and if they were given, what happened to them. So this investigation should be wider. I'm sure the Senate will do a good job. We should know who failed in their duties, and that's why I said
sure. Even if they say, pardon me to partner, even if they say, well, if it's not up to $1 million, I mean, if you see someone consistently put in place maybe just a little
999 900 over a pattern, absolutely again, red flag. I keep saying it should raise a red flag.
And now you saw the Senate, well, you trust in the Senate. Would you want them to go into what they call a closed door session? You know, initially we were seeing everything, and now we're getting to hear that it just might turn out to be a closed door probe panel. Will that be okay?
Well, if it's important that certain things be received behind the doors, for as long as the desire is to get to the truth, which will ultimately surface in the report, so be it. I will not query how the Senate runs its business, but I'll rest on the disgust expressed by the President of the Senate about this whole thing and other members. I really think it should take more than closed doors for us to override that disgust, because it is the way that we all feel. You're just messing around with dead people and people who are helpless in society. I think that's dastardly. Anybody who wants to go behind closed doors to hide it, good luck to them, but it's not going to go away.
Yeah, but if the President of the Senate has said that, well, he's disgusted by that, should we have some sort of ray of hope, or giving them the benefit of the doubt that, who knows, this one perhaps?
I think we should even commend the Senate for tracking this whole thing down. I mean, this has been going on for years, and the amount we're talking about is staggering. Just like when we started with the subsidy probe, we all thought it was 600 billion, then it climbed to this, and now you're talking about 2 trillion. Same thing. Everyone thought we were dealing with 6 billion, then 41 billion, and now we're looking at about 180 billion. I just wonder why we have so much money in this country, and we live this sort of pedestrian lifestyles. No good roads, no railways. We ought to be able to sort of come out of our houses, 10-minute walk, get into railways, and most of these can form base guarantees for these things to be done. So what corruption does to us is far beyond what me and you can imagine. And really, the fight should not be over. Incidentally, you are the younger generation. Don't let it happen. A lot of us feel a bit wasted with all the high hopes we all came back with. I just returned from Kenya yesterday, and at the just before you get into the Jomo Kenyatta Airport, you get to the equivalent of our toll points. It's automated. You go there, you take your ticket. There's not a human soul around. Well, what do you see with our airports? Cash, everything is keep going on. It's open to abuse. They bring their tickets, you take their money, and this has been going on for several years. And it just symbolizes what goes on everywhere else. There's IT today that can help check a lot of corruption, and we must introduce it. The introduction of biometrics is doing a lot of wonders, and no minister should come under pressure to stop it, because we can't continue like this. We're just going to grind to a halt at some point.
Well, this is going to be amazing, but we'll all just keep tabs on that and hope that all of this, because if the names of the IGP, the EFCC chair all popped up at some point in time and they didn't know about it. Even the coordinating minister was said to have allowed some, £6 million, and she wasn't aware of that.
Exactly.
So much
his name dropping. His name dropping. And that's what you have when you have crooks working the system. They just drop them. I know the president. The president said, this one didn't say, these guys don't know anything about what's going on. If this had not come to the open, they would perhaps still be in the dark about what's going on.
Wow.
even though it is clear that something wrong is going on.
Doesn't that tell us that, we should be careful how we jump to conclusions? Because
Absolutely.
it would seem that there's someone who's out there just trying to rubbish the name of everybody else.
We should be very careful because, let's face it, some people have toiled so hard for their name. And it's not just because they're in the public service doesn't make them corrupt.
But they'll do well to speak up.
We should protect those ones, yes. And let's face it, it's taken some of them to let all these things come to light. So if they were also bad, they will have just kept quiet.
What about the likes of Tony, is it Ladapo now? Ishola, who blew the whistle. How do we encourage some people to keep coming forward?
That's why I keep saying that we must begin to look at corruption from a security point of view, and then have everybody start complying. Compliance workshops like they do everywhere abroad. It's a ground for promotions. It's a ground for doing anything. And what these compliance things do for you is that they keep letting you know the do's and the don'ts and how much of it you imbibe. And these are simple questions over a period of time. So, in my opinion, if we start that rigorously and on a continuous basis, even if it's only 10% who get converted, we will change the corruption wheel to start working good for us in this country. Right now, enforcement is zilch.